Working on my tail block, I took a piece of spruce and I flattened one surface and squared it to one side. So this is my flat surface squared to this side, and I've marked, I used my marking gauge to mark a 10 millimeter line all around this. I'm gonna pencil it in. So my plan is to run this against my bandsaw fence and run this against my bandsaw table. So my blade will hit this 10 millimeter mark from the inside, and hopefully I can get a nice, and this I'm using my new fence that I built. I'll post something on that. Now to flatten this and square it, I'm using my Stanley number 4 right there and my block plane. So my tail block blank is ready. This knot is not gonna come into the play because I'm gonna radius it from this side, but these two small knots, yeah, a little worried about those. Let's see how that goes. So I just went with my Stanley 4 and my block plane, and I got this to a decent 10 millimeter thickness. My setup here is fairly straightforward. I use pieces of spruce. I do have a plain stop, just a piece of MDF that I screwed into my workbench, and I have a tail vise that I'd installed, and I got a dowel right there that I use. But for smaller pieces such as this, I just use thin kind of veneers, about 3 millimeter or what have you. I clamp it on one side of the table of my workbench, use kettleballs on the other side. Keeps the piece pretty stable in between these two, and that's how I work these. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to mark this thing, and I'm going to take it to my bandsaw, cut the circle, and maybe I even build a jig for this and then start shaping it. Okay. So let's take a look at how I've dimensioned this tail block. Okay. So I've left a 15 millimeter offset from that edge. So from that edge right there, that's 15 millimeters. Okay. And then this is 136 millimeter diameter of that circle. And this face is the one that will be curved and shaped. Okay, so I've just noted that on this particular face. So this is the face where the ribs are going to be glued. So again, that's 15 millimeter offset, and that diameter, that length of that base is 136 millimeter. Okay. And then these two, I've got two flats on either end, 20 to 25 millimeters, and that's for the end rib bands. Now this anchor point, I anchor the compass, pivot it, and draw a radius of 68 millimeter. I'm going to describe where that 68 millimeter is coming from. Okay. So what you're looking at is my bowl profile template on the tail end. Okay, so I'd mentioned that my tail block thickness is 10 millimeters. All right, So my ball length is, inner ball length is 485.5 millimeters. So I subtract 10 from that. So at station 475.5 millimeters, I measure the depth of the ball. Okay, and that is, based on my design, it is 68 millimeters, and that's where I got that dimension from. Okay, and this is part one of the layout, and I will describe part two of the layout, which is actually the profile curve, similar to what I did with the neck block. That geometry has to be laid out on this rectangular billet, and then that billet has to be shaped to follow this curve right here. Okay, so now I'm gonna go cut this semicircle with my bandsaw, and this is after I cut it on the bandsaw. Okay, nothing too exciting or dramatic here. I've just filed the semicircle down to the line. I'm using a rasp, and I used some sandpaper, 240 grit, and I'm using a jig. Just makes it easier and convenient, gives me something to hold this block on my vise. So let's look at part two of transferring the bowl profile geometry onto the tail block. Okay, so this is the end shape of that geometry of the tail block. Okay, so this is the should be that familiar 68 millimeter radius that I just described. Okay, and that's the pivot point for that radius. Okay, and that's the 15 millimeter offset. Okay, so in part two of the transfer, we got to work on this 10 millimeter thickness of the block. Okay, and the idea is that so from the template, we got to transfer this geometry onto that 10 millimeter thickness. So that's the tail side of my bowl profile. Okay, so the way to do that, and I'm gonna show it in the video in a minute. I'm gonna demonstrate it. There may be other methods to do it. The way I do it is, so imagine this is still that 10 millimeter width, right? So I put a mark on both of these ends. I typically mark it at 3 millimeter. Okay, so if that's your 10 millimeter width, then just hang a mark at 30%. Okay, and the reason that mark is important is because then it gives a reference of tracing that tail profile. Okay, so it's easier to work with a clone of that tail profile. So this piece right here matches this profile right here on the tail, right? Okay, so if you put that bowl profile onto that center point of that rectangular billet, that curve of that tail profile should exactly match, or the tail block profile should exactly match that bowl profile curve, as you can see over here. So that's the objective we have, right? So if we put that 30% mark on this corner, then there's a reference that it provides you where you can run this curve, and you do it on both sides. So let me take you back to the bench and let me demonstrate how I actually transfer that bowl profile geometry on the tail side to the rectangular billet. On this side, I'm just going to lay it on the center line. So that's my center line, right? I have a mark right on this edge. So you can see this mark maybe on the camera. This is not visible, but I've just extended this to this edge and then took it to the back side, right? So I am going to line up this on this tail block, right? And then I'm going to, and this has to be reasonably accurate. So this has to line up fairly accurate. This edge is just going to meet that on this surface, right? Or on this corner. So you just lay it out the best you can. I'm happy with the way it's sitting. And I just run a mark. Okay. Okay. This is as good as it will get. Then I flip it for the other side and repeat that process on this other side. Okay. Beautiful. Okay. So now what I have here is I have these, right? I have these marked, right? So first thing I'll do is I'll start filing these two corners, this corner and this corner, and bring it to this profile line, right? And then I will use my compass and extend that profile, and I'll just add to this video, I'll extend that profile around this circumference and then start shaping. That will give me kind of a depth mark pretty much, and then I'll start shaping from the top towards this. So the back side of this will not change shape, but this profile right here will take on the shape as you can see. So this will take on this shape right here, but the back side will stay flat as is. Okay. So in the example I just showed, I did not put that 30% in my example, the 3mm reference mark on the two ends. And the issue there is the symmetry between the left and the right. Okay. So here I'm showing where I do have the mark, and then I can extend that curve symmetrically on both the left and the right side. All right. So I'm just going about 30%, so 3mm. So I just did. So I just marked these two now on this other side. So that's the 3mm, and same 3mm on this side right here. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so now these two are dead on. So if you can see the symmetry, so this line comes right here, and this right from that same uh, percentage, right, 75% comes straight here, right here. So now what I got to do is I got to grind these two. I'm gonna file them. Eventually, I've got my portable sander kind of that I'm gonna build a stand for, so then I can just use that um, to do this. But for now, I'm just gonna use my file manually. I'm gonna file this, right? So these two corners will come in, right? These two corners will come into this line. This corner will come into that line, and then that gives me a reference, and I can start shaping the backside of this, right? Let's see how it goes. Okay. Here in this step of the process, what I'm doing is just filing these two corners to the line, the profile line, and then I have to extend that line and then start filing from the top of this tail block. So all I'm using is a metal file. My rasp is a little aggressive for the edge, and I don't want to break a chunk below that profile line, so I'm just going a little easy. Now, if I had made my disc sander, I could have used that to get this job done, but this is all right. I mean, I'll just do it manually. It's going to take a little bit just to make sure that I get this right. But that's the step of the process I'm currently working on. I'll continue. So in this step of the process that I just showed, I filed down the two sides down to the bowl profile curve that I traced, which I'd shown earlier in the video. Okay. Now in the next step, what I'm going to show, this geometry, this profile has to be extended around the semicircle of this tail block, right? So I'm going to show how to do that next. So I don't need to put these screws too deep. That holds pretty all right. Okay, so now what I have to do is I'm just going to take my compass and I am going to get it as and I'm okay staying above the line for now, and then later I can move it down. So for now I'm just going to this should be all right. So all I'm doing is from this point I'm just putting a mark, and I'll do the same thing from the other side. So I'm just from this point, so I have to take it even lower than this, but for now Okay, like so. And I'm using the back, the flat of that back, to lay my pin or my point. And then the graphite I'm just laying where I need to lay it on this, and I'm just going to continue this mark all around the circumference. Actually, I wanted to keep kind of 40% that I want to remove. We'll see when I complete this where I end up. But this will give me an approximate profile around the circumference. And this is an exercise where, I'm going to do the best I can to shape it and then just eye it and see and, uh, put my rib against it and see if it lays flat. Yeah, I'm glad I'm going to knock off this knot. So give or take, this is what I end up with, right? So idea is that now that I have these points, I just got to get these edges down to this level, to this width, kind of, right, all around the circumference. This is the first tail block I'm doing. It's a little bit of a learning process, but we'll see how this one goes. Okay. Okay, in this step of the process, I am just using my rasp to file around this circumference and get it down to the profile line. I'm just going at a slight angle and then just easing it towards the center of this tail block, and I'm going slow, staying above the line. Do the best I can to make sure that I follow this profile on the circumference. So, so this is coming along pretty okay. So that's the profile from the top side, right? Or the base side. And this is the top side where the ribs are gonna come, right? So, so it looks pretty reasonable. I've got my jig. I've got this thing sitting on my jig. But that top piece is the spruce. I'm just trying to do the best I can to keep this shape smooth. So when I have my ribs,
So I'll get a feel that there's no gaps, right? So my ribs are gonna come like so, right? So I still got to work on this, for example, on this side, for example, because when I curve the rib or when I bend the rib, I don't want any gaps at all. So I'll continue working on this, right, till I get it right, and then I'll test it using a bend rib, which I have to bend a rib. I haven't bent a rib, so okay. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with this profile right now. I think this is as good as it's gonna get for now. I'm going to take it out and sand it and just smooth it out. And I think I'm gonna the next step is I'm gonna start working on my form and my ribs, right? And then through the process, so I do see a slight kind of hump here. I need to get this down a bit, I guess. Maybe not. Anyways, so when I actually install my first ribs, it's gonna give me a much better idea on how this is actually gonna play out for me, or how it's actually gonna work out for me, right? So until then, it's difficult to say. So let's see. So this is how it looks like. Right. I think it'll work, but I don't think I thinned it too much. I just followed pretty much the profile I had. Right. So we'll see so this I still got to, based on the profile, I still got to file this just a tad more to get it right on that line. So let me do that, and then I'm gonna leave it. I'm just gonna sand it smooth, and then just see how this thing goes.